Hi, I'm Katja Fort Rhoden, and I'm here in Columbia, Maryland, where I grew up. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a double lung transplant recipient. I received my double lung transplant in 2018. I was born with um, lung disease, and at the time of my birth, nobody really understood the circumstances which led to my disease. And so I was one of those children that was in and out of Children's Hospital my whole life. And my disease really perplexed doctors. And again, in 2010, when I got diagnosed with chronic variable immune deficiency, which is a disorder that affects your ability to make antibodies, they thought, aha, that's the light bulb. That is why I had such advanced lung disease at such a young age. And that's the first time I got worked up for a transplant. At that time, I had a 2-year-old, and the idea of a transplant, especially lung transplant, with it being one of the riskiest transplants with some of the highest rejection and mortality rates, my motivation was very much to try to, what I jokingly say, is squeeze as much life out as my lungs as I could. As I was declining with my health, my goal was really to try to avoid transplant. I'm really afraid of the idea of a transplant. I guess, it's that saying, the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. So my doctors had to kind of convince me that it was time. So as I was deteriorating and starting to become worked up for a lung transplant, my son started showing some really abnormal respiratory signs for otherwise what you would think a healthy 9-year-old. We go to Johns Hopkins and the doctor evaluates him and says, I took a look at his CT and I took a look at your CT, and I'm noticing some really abnormal findings. And they say, hey, that immune disorder that you got diagnosed with in 2010, we bet you that's what he has. And I, as a parent, I was like, okay, nobody wants their child to have an illness, but if it's that, there's a treatment, okay. So that was our working hypothesis, is that he and I both had this immune disorder, and that was likely the cause of our lung disease. So as we're heading into 2018, I was hospitalized, and my doctor gives me a call. I'll never forget it. Anytime a doctor asks you, when's the last time you ate, you're in trouble. So she calls and says, what time did you eat? And it's 11 o'clock at night. And she says, Katja, we have an organ for you. We have a lung for you. And it was the most amazing moment. And I paused, and she could hear it in my voice. And luckily, I have established a long relationship with her. And she says, it's time. It's really time. You've gone as far as you can. You've done a great job, but it's time. You need this, and it's a perfect match. And I said, okay, we'll win. And she's like, well, we have the OR scheduled for you at 5 a.m. And so the next, within hours, I was only listed for about 4 days. But again, I had a lifetime of lung disease. And it was, a local donor. I feel like I'm getting a little choked up. I know it was somebody young. So it's a very solemn gift. I know I have other friends who are organ recipients. It's hard to be in the position to need a transplant, because you know that your life is depending on someone else's horrible day. So the day that you get a second chance at life is someone else's probably saddest day in their life. And so it's a very, very solemn and kind of holy experience when you get that phone call and when you wake up from surgery. So at the same time I get my lung transplant, they find out that my son does not have the same immune disorder. And we kind of go down this rabbit hole. And through my son and testing him, we discovered that we have a rare disease that has never been medically documented. And unfortunately, in the 3 years since I had my lung transplant, my son has had a significant decline in his health. And so he is now kind of the same position that I was as a child, and knowing that someday it's very likely that he will need an organ transplant. So to say that organ donation has been an element, a factor in my entire life, and now as a mother, my child's life. I've just always had this in my mind of knowing that my whole life as a child was dependent, as a woman, as an adult, was dependent on someday an act of goodwill by a stranger. And now I'm here, healthy and strong, and knowing that now my child will someday depend on that need. It's hard for me to share how sick I was before I had my transplant. I mean, I could not walk a few yards without needing oxygen. I needed very high flow oxygen. I needed like a portable ventilator. And so, some people think, oh, you have surgery and you wake up and you take that first breath. But it's not that simple. Recovery is a really long process, but it's the everyday, it's the today. Like I'm here in my hometown. Out the window in front of me, right behind the trees, is the childhood home where my parents still live. I'm very integrated into this community. I get to go out, and it's just literally waking up or walking up a flight of stairs are the everyday things that you literally pause and say, this is amazing. I would not be here if it wasn't for my donor, if it wasn't for somebody either choosing for themselves to be an organ donor or their family given that opportunity to elect to allow their family member and loved one to be a donor. But it really is, it's the little things. And I think more than anything now, being healthy and being strong and being able to be here for my son, given the complexity of what we're learning about our health. And, if you believe in fate, learning about our disease might offer more insight to other people with lung disease. So, we're in this like interconnected web of life. And so somebody gave me an opportunity to live and to be here. And by continuing to be here, I try to pay it forward, and I try to live a life every day that honors my donor, who I do not know, but that's okay, because that just makes me think that anybody watching this could be my donor. We just adopt each other. I'm just very fortunate to have had this opportunity, and I hope that I honor my donor in my deeds and acts.